Buongiorno. Without readers, there would not be a publishing industry. We are the most important part of your industry, other than maybe authors, and we're not talked about very much at conferences like this. So I'm here to talk about readers, and yes, I realize it takes a lot of moxie to talk for all readers, but I have a lot of great credentials in this area. My mother wrote this note when I was 5 years old. She had absolutely no idea that this particular note, this is actually a reproduction, would change my life. As I was walking to school that day, I realized the conversation we'd had and the words on this note were the same thing. I was going to get to leave school early. I figured out how to read, and by learning to read, I found the keys to the universe. And later, I found a better thing. I learned how to buy books. I buy a lot of books. I buy numbers of books that you can't imagine. In packing for this trip, what I really did was pack my Kindle. I bought 10 books just in case the plane was delayed. I don't like conversations that start with, we have to talk about your books, but I have them a lot with my husband. So the digital reading revolution was tailor-made for me. And it was fun. I read all about it in 1998 on screens. You know the articles where people said, nobody's going to read on a screen. I was doing this on my 1998 computer monitor. I was reading ebooks in 1998. I had a Rocket ebook, which was the first, I guess, the first digital reader. It was good, but I abandoned it because it was just too much work. I was given a Kindle. I thought, oh, this is nice. You know, maybe in a while I'll get used to it. A month later, I realized I couldn't let go of the thing. It was like every other book in my life. I couldn't let it out of my sight. So I stopped hiding books in my desk, my car, the bathroom, my office, all of these places, because I had the best new device in the world. I was so modern. I had an e-ink device. And I guess this really led to me thinking about how happy my Kindle made me. And make no mistake about it, when you are talking about reading, the Kindle ecosystem makes readers very, very happy. It is designed to make us happy. But it's not really how I read. And I keep thinking about this over and over, especially as I was preparing for this talk. How do I really read? I read all day long. I start reading from the moment I get out of bed. I'm starting with Twitter. I'm starting with Facebook, email. I read audiobooks while I take long walks. I read more email, more Twitter, more news when I get home. When I get to the office, I'm reading contracts. I'm doing online research, more contracts, more news. I am reading constantly. And the funny thing is, I hardly ever pick up my Kindle. What I've discovered is that I read digitally all day long, and I'm doing most of it on the web. I'm doing it most in areas where people don't really consider it reading apps or reading specific. A lot of people are like me. And I discovered, as I probably should have suspected all along, that I am a purely digital reader, except when it comes to magazines. As you might guess, I'm a little bit of a magazine addict, and I cannot read them digitally because nobody has come up with a good way. If I need instructions on how to read something, then I'm not going to bother. And the thing is, as I walk around the office, you know, some people walk around to make sure that their staff is working. I'm walking around to see what they're reading. And I find that people in my office, normal people, are just like me. Heavy print readers, audiobook readers, but they're also reading online all day long. Print is still huge in this industry, but what we don't talk about much is how often people are actually reading online and how to actually reach out to those readers more. And when the publishing industry talks about readers, and they don't talk about us all that much, they talk about a reader who is so plugged into the industry, readers who know what's on the bestseller list. They know publisher release schedules. They have the time to go to author signings. They know all of these things. And this reader, this platonic reader that I've named, only exists in marketing meetings. Real readers aren't like that at all. They have very messy, busy lives. They're the kind of people who are just now getting around to books released in 2009. They're the kind of people who think it's really exciting when they could read 1 or 2 grown-up books a month. They just don't live in the world that publishing people realize. And so I hear a lot, and I get pitched a lot of reading products, things for readers. And the question I have for everybody who's ever pitched me, and the question I have for everybody in this room who is doing something in this industry, is what reader are you targeting? What person do you think will actually be using your applications, your devices, your systems, your website? Are you aiming toward this rare reader? This reader exists so infrequently, but it is a reader that you want to target. You just have to figure out how to give this person more than they already have. Or the vacation reader, the intermittent reader, the person who only picks up a novel or two every now and then, and this person is probably the one that we're looking for when we talk about discovery, because they just really don't know where to find their books. How are you going to reach a reader who is more likely to borrow a book from her sister as she is to actually wander into a grocery store and buy a book? Or maybe you're looking for the beginning reader. To me, this is the most exciting thing, and as I've heard people talk today and people who are going to be coming after me, this reader is the reader we're developing for whether we know it or not. But it's not just the child reader we're talking about. We live in a world where literacy is less than optimal. Those are people trying to learn to read, and if you've ever worked with literacy programs, you realize that they want to read. How can you help these readers? How can you help readers who want to read in their non-native language? There's so much that we can do in the educational reading marketplace, and everybody I know in this industry is so creative, and I just want to see what you can do for people who just want to read. Then there's the audiobook reader. I live in Los Angeles, and we, as a lifestyle, sit in our cars at least an hour a day. I sit in my car an hour, hour and a half, sometimes 3 hours a day. And a lot of people I know read audiobooks exclusively. I know mothers, many mothers, who only read audiobooks because in their cars, that is the only time that they have to themselves. I know people who run marathons. They listen to books instead of music. And I can attest to getting lost in a story while you're going long miles makes those miles disappear. And this reader has kind of unique needs that I never hear anybody talking about. Audiobook readers pay as much attention to narrators as they do actual authors. The narrator is as important, if not more important to them than the author of the book. They also have storage problems. They have different needs. How do you target a reader who isn't necessarily print-centric? And there's one more reader I'd like you to think about. The vision-impaired reader. This particular person is using a combination of technologies, audio and, well, mostly audio and tactile, to read on the web. Vision-impaired readers do incredible amounts of reading online. But again, when we develop apps, when we talk about things, how many are you testing for accessibility? And it's not just blind readers who have this problem. What about deaf readers, your interactive books and media? How are you accommodating somebody who can't hear that great sound clip? And what about the mobility impaired readers, somebody who can't hold a heavy book or maybe doesn't necessarily have the fine motor skills to swipe and touch? You have to make things available. I used to joke that Kindle One was the best thing for a treadmill because it had these big, huge page-turning panels. You didn't need much motor strength, much skill at all. You could just move those pages along fast. Think about all the different readers that you have in your life when you're developing. And when I said it was arrogant to speak for all readers, it's because my readers have always made it clear that they are very unique, they have unique needs, and things that I say may be true for me, but not for them. So what do readers really want? As you may guess from my brief profile of readers, it's really hard to say unless you know who your audience is. But there are a few things we do have in common. Content that solves a problem or a need. Most people, I read, I'm probably a weird reader in that if I have nothing to read, I will just read a cereal box over and over. I'll just keep flipping, same words for an hour if that's what I have to do. Most people are trying to fulfill a need, achieve a goal, get away from it all, something. For example, how-to manuals. These are never going to go out of style, but I'm finding them increasingly useless because the problems I'm trying to solve don't necessarily require me to buy a whole book when I'm just trying to change a light bulb. Think about the content and how your readers will find it most useful. And when I'm looking at fiction, I need information that tells me how am I going to reach that emotional state. Do I want an intellectual challenge? Do I want to laugh? Do I want to be terrified? Or do I just want to sit down and cry for a couple hours? And I actually have books I read purely because I want to cry. Readers don't sit down and say, you know, I want some of that really good metadata. They don't even have to know it exists. They just inherently expect it to be part of their reading process. It should be from the moment that they start discovering books to the moment that they process it. But when publishers think about metadata, they think about creating a commercial transaction not with a reader. That is the job often of booksellers. Their commercial transaction is with a retailer. And so a lot of the metadata that comes through is codes, it's the ISBNs, it's all that stuff. It's not reader-friendly data. And metadata shouldn't be a data dump, it should be useful information that should connect people with books. And here's how readers think of metadata. Readers think of, oh, it was a prettier slide yesterday. Readers think of metadata in their own words. We use real words. I don't know ISBNs. I know ISBNs. I don't memorize ISBNs. I don't care about BISAC codes. I don't need to know your technical jargon. I use my words. I will go into a bookstore, and I've done this, and said, it's a blue book written by a woman, and her husband died. And the bookseller said, oh, you want this one. And that was the book I wanted, because I couldn't remember the author name. I couldn't remember this. I couldn't remember that. Readers use their own words. Describe your books in reader terms, and this will aid in discovery. Readers also want innovation. As I mentioned, my reading life is vastly different. My inner reading life, this reader where I sit on the couch all day reading, is very different than the reader I really am. And I wonder what my 5-year-old self would think about me, the reader today, and all the opportunities I have, and how she would approach the world that I'm living in. And I have a way to find this out. My niece is almost 2, and she comes from a long line of readers. I have no doubt that she is going to be a huge reader, but she's not going to live in the world I lived in. She's not going to pull encyclopedias from a shelf. She's not going to pull random reference books and start reading. Her dictionaries will never be 20 years out of date. The information she has will never be old. And I think that this is fantastic. So some people are like, that's so sad. It's not sad. It's great, because she's got more opportunity to read than ever before. But she's also growing up in a world where when she sits down to read a book on the couch, her definitions are going to be very different. And she's also going to be expecting interactive content. She's going to be expecting to create as much as she's expecting to read. Her vision of reading is, I can't even imagine what it's going to be like when she's 15, and I'm kind of looking forward to it. Another thing readers want is content over containers. The longer I live my life online, the more I realize that so much amazing stuff out there is locked up in book format. And don't get me wrong, I love the book format. But the way I live and the way so many people I know live is that we need our information in a way that actually makes sense for our lives. A good example of this is this particular book. I travel a lot, and being a gluten-free person, I always need this information. This, by the way, is the 5th edition of this book. The 6th edition, who knows? But the problem with a book like this is that the information is out of date the moment the book is printed, if not before it actually goes to press. That's not useful information for me. When I'm in New York City looking for a restaurant in Times Square that I could eat at, I need that information right now. I can't wait for the 6th edition. And what I'm looking for, and the more I look at this book, which I've used exactly once, and that was to help a friend, is I am looking for a website. I'm looking for an app. I'm looking for real-time information, and I can't get it. So I rely on a less efficient methodology. I rely on Google. Google is a wonderful search engine, but when you start searching for specialized information, you get too broad results. You get too much information, and what I want is actually to get to the heart of what I need, and that is the bookish information I keep talking about. You have already curated this stuff. Now just give it to me in the way I really can use it with a mobile life or any life. We also want quality. I don't like free books, and I like to pay for books. That is the number one thing in my life, is I want to give you money for books. The problem is you're not meeting me halfway. I, as a digital reader, know better than most how poorly formatted so many ebooks are, and I will admit it's getting better. What happened with the latest J.K. Rowling release is absolutely inexcusable, and the publisher should have been humiliated. I guess they were. But it's not just formatting. Formatting is only one part of what makes a book valuable to a reader. We know instinctively when a book has seen a good editor. We know that you forgot to hire the proofreader. It's obvious to us. We know when you are publishing a book that you shouldn't have published despite the fact that it was a best-selling author. All of these elements in our mind combine to create value in a book. And when I heard earlier people talking about how the price of books has gone down, one of the things that I don't believe can ever be factored into the price discussion is how the quality of the books you give readers factors into their perception of how much they should pay. But it does factor into our minds. I can look at a $10 book by a new-to-me author, and it could be by a big publisher, and I'm going to say, I have not had great luck with this publisher in the past. I'm going to pass on this author. Had the book been priced lower, I might have thought differently, because I'm willing to excuse errors for slightly less money. We are still very much in the early stages of this digital revolution. I can't even guess what's going to happen. And everybody in this room has an opportunity to change the world, to change our reading lives. A woman asked me once, and she was older than me by 10, 15 years, she wanted to know, what are we supposed to call these things that we used to call books? And I didn't have an answer, because I don't think we have ever really been able, ever sat down and said, what are we doing? What are books? What are these things? And the thing is, I don't really care. I'm pretty comfortable with the vocabulary I have now. What I really care about is what you are going to be doing in the future for readers like me and my niece and your children and your grandchildren. Thank you. And